over to you, Mansour, and thank you for giving today's Coffee and Talk, requiring modelling for AI Act compliance for data sharing in health data spaces. So I shall hand it over to you, Mansour. Thank you.
All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Coffee Talk. And today the topic of my talk is requirement modeling for AI Act compliance for data sharing in health data spaces. So while I give a talk, you guys can have a coffee. So the European Union is on the verge of adopting a series of regulations that will basically affect how data is collected and how data is being processed in the EU. So these include, some of these include the Data Governance Act, Digital Market Act, AI Act, and the Data Act. So the evolving nature of international standards for trustworthy AI basically exacerbates these requirements and compliance mapping challenges. So on one hand, we need to harmonize the request for the AI Act to be satisfied by the European standards development organizations that are not currently deriving those standards, and to proliferate for the other proprietary or international or the national guidelines and standards for the trustworthy AI. So this work is basically presents an open approach to capture requirements from different regulations and associated standards documents so that the sufficiency of the local management process and resulting artifacts exchanges between the value chain actors can be compared, and the compliance with the different regulatory bodies in the EU for the policy requirements can be assessed and tracked. So the proposed EU AI Act and its intersection with the EU GDPR, which is General Data Protection Regulation, could present compliance issues for data compliance officers across the Europe. So this has been mentioned in one of the news, and the AI Act has some similarities with Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act regarding how they clarify the GDPR. So, however, there is a deficiency. There is a differ between the AI Act, for example, the sensitive data that could be, for example, if I say the ethnic origin, that could be previously processed under the GDPR with the data subject's consent. So while now that can be processed by the AI systems algorithm.
Mansour, we lost your audio.
There, Mansour.
Yeah.
We've lost sound there, Mansour.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear.
We can't hear you.
Mansour.
Check your mic.
But I can hear him.
Everything is okay on my side.
Yeah,
I can hear you, Mansour.
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you too. Here, Michaela speaking.
So there
Carol, you cannot hear Mansour?
Message him, Joe. We still can't hear him.
Carol. So,
No, we still can't hear you, Mansour.
oh, so the problem is in IVI.
yeah, can you just type?
I'm
Oh.
Ah.
Oh. Okay, Claudia.
Okay, so
The problem is on our side, so we can't hear it, Mansour.
so we have audio problems.
There's actually, yeah, that makes sense because this box is never yellow, right?
Just mute us for the time being.
All right, so the AI Act has some similarities with the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act regarding how the data is being processed with the GDPR. So, however, the AI Act differs in that context. For example, if we talk about the sensitive data, and the ethnic origin is a kind of a sensitive data, so that could be previously processed by the GDPR with the consent of the data subject. So, but now with the advent of the AI systems algorithm, the certain conditions are met without meeting the GDPR's consent standard as per the Article 10 of the draft legislation. So can you hear me now?
I can hear you, Masu, but probably they can't. I don't know. Seems like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right.
We can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Oh
It's
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Good.
So now we identify what are the real requirements for modeling for AI Act compliance. So we have divided it into 3 different categories. For example, to understand the degree to which those standard compliance will deliver regulatory compliance for AI. For extracting and sharing the terms and concepts which are basically relevant to the legal and standard texts into and portray or maybe demonstrate it into open knowledge graphs, and to come up with the adequacy of the standard conformance so as to identify the areas where further technical consensus development in trustworthy AI value chains will be required to achieve regulatory compliance. So the EU data spaces data is an essential resource for the economic growth, competitiveness, innovation, job creation, and societal progress in the society. So the European strategy for data, which basically aims for creating a single market for the data that will basically ensure the Europe's global competitiveness and data sovereignty. Some of the common European data spaces will ensure that more data becomes available for the use in the economy, and keeping companies and individuals who generate those data, they should have a control on that, so that the access to the data should be only to the people who have the rights to access the data, to process the data, and to share the data. So these are some of the common European data spaces which exist. For example, health data spaces, agriculture data spaces, finance data spaces, mobility, public automation, administration skills. So the purpose is so they should have a rich pool of data to have a free flow of data across different sectors and countries, to have the full respect to the GDPR. So the GDPR basically talks about how the data will be shared, for how long the companies can keep the data, so on and so forth. It's a complete documentation regarding handling of the data. And then horizontal framework for data governance and data access. So data sharing regulatory mappings have certain checks which we need to identify before we go ahead with that. So the foremost is whether all the captured regulatory requirements are addressed by available management system requirements or other technical requirements. Are there any regulatory requirements have mappings to specific technical activities which are defined in the technical standards? Do the requirement mapping is partial in that they use different definition? For example, we can say the normative strictness. For example, the requirement could be the must or shall, and compares to the recommendations should be there, and the permission may, or the possibility can. So we need to have a look on these mappings as well. And are there any terms in the regulatory requirements for which mapping to the technical standard requirements activities or entities cannot be fully determined? So this is the mapping concept which we have come up with for the AI Act with the ISO EC SC42 standards. So to address the challenges of mapping normative statements from regulations such as the AI Act against those of different standards from the different standard development or standards development organizations. So we need to be able to catalog the normative statement from these different sources of the documents. So this approach will specifically aims to enable the interlinking of requirements between the regulatory text and the text specifying such international standards. So that will be to harmonize the standard requirements will deliver through the regulatory compliance. So the ISO standards are accessible through a text documents, and those are basically very difficult difficulty and have difficulties in the implementation if we have two or more standards from different or the same domain or for an organization. For example, the ISO MSS. So we need to have a look on what are the different standards and what do they offer in this context, and to interlink between those that is a tedious task. So the mapping requirements into the linked open data resources will help to create systems that will basically be capable of defining the requirements which are needed to comply with the domain specific standard, for example, information security, quality management, and additionally identify and represent the concepts related to a standard, for example, the words or phrases defined in the document with a specific meaning. So we extract those concepts requirement extraction. We then go for the concept definition extraction. We map them on the existing ones, and then we acquire or maybe extract requirement and concept as develop requirement and concept association, and then finally portray into a knowledge graph where these informations will be shown to the end users. All right, so thank you very much. I stop here, and you are welcome to comment or any topic for discussion.
Thanks, Mansoor. We'll open the floor to anyone online or in the room for questions.
I'd be very interested, Mansoor, to see if it could be applied to some other standards in the IT space or maybe in the cybersecurity space. I think it's really interesting what you're trying to do in terms of that. I mean, it's what we've done in IVI for a long time, but in a very manual way. So, you know, looking at other standards, you know, and abstracting them up to our own standard and trying to capture all the requirements and all the knowledge that are encapsulated in multiple standards. I think it's an extremely interesting project from that perspective. I'd love to have a chat with you to see how we could apply it in other spheres.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for the comment. Actually, we are heading towards this. We just took as a test case, and definitely we can extend the same for other domains, looking into the different standards which exist and map accordingly the way we did for this use case scenario. Mm.
Mansoor, can you maybe please tell us a bit more about this AI Act, this initiative? Is it some sort of attempt of regulating AI in Europe? Is that?
Yeah, so the AI Act is regarding, for example, what the software does and how the software process. So all the risks associated to it comes under the AI Act. So there are like a low, medium, and high, I should say, the different levels of it. So if the information is being processed and that information, if if we share that information with any third party, so what are the different risks associated to it and how the company will comply to it? So those kind of information is being portrayed or exhibited in the AI Act. So is the same, for example, for the GDPR, which is the general GDPR Act, which talks about how the personal information is processed, how you share the information, how long the information will be shared, and these kind of things are, so the GDPR Act is totally related to the personal information, and there is a Data Act, which is again related to the sharing of the data with the third parties. So how the data will be shared with the third party, for example, for the researchers, for the research perspective, for any organization with any other organization to conclude some information out of it. So that data sharing kind of information, all those regulations are being captured in the Data Act. So same goes for the AI Act, which I just introduced a couple of minutes ago.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
But is the AI Act related to the EU ethics guidelines for the AI? Because I think there was this kind of initial work, and the act should be kind of a consequence of that, or not? Is it something related?
Yeah, so there is one AI Act, and there is AI Act for ethics and trustworthiness as well. So these two are correlated with each other. So there is a lot of work going on towards the ethics side as well.
Mansur, so when you say like you get into modeling part of the modeling part of your project, like, can you explain, like, perhaps like I didn't get that in the presentation, like what do you model, like, and how do you do it?
So the modeling is, we have got the standard documents. There are different standards, for example, ISO standards. I would just take an example of the ISO standards. So for example, SC42, we have got 5259. So that is a standard, and that is the PDF document. So we transform that into a CSV representation. Then we extract, using the NLP techniques, we extract the requirement extraction and the concept and extraction out of it. So once we are done with that, we map it, the requirement mapping, and then the concept definition mapping. Once you are done with that, we then generate the knowledge graph out of it to show, for example, in the standard document ISO SC42, so something related to the data sharing, it states that. And there are some other standards as well, which also talks about the data sharing. So there are different standards which exist right now, and to extract information related to the data sharing, I mean, you need to go for each and every a standard document to read it in a complete way and to see what it states about the data sharing. So we are providing a platform where we'll be accumulating all the information related to the data sharing, and to identify to the end user or to the company or to the organization to have a look on, if you are sharing the data, what are the different standards say about it, and you can act accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions? Comments? I think we'll leave it there. So Mansoor, if there's no more questions or comments, thank you very much again, Mansoor. And just to mention, our digital construction webinar will take place this afternoon at 3 o'clock. So if you're available to join, please do. And we'll continue our coffee talks next week. We'll hear from Florrie Neff from TUS in Technology University of Shannon. So yeah, please join us then, and thank you all for joining today. And thanks again, Mansoor.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.